What's up, everybody? Welcome to your Saturday mailbag here for fantasy football. Today, I got two awesome analysts with me. I am Adam Azer. All right, we're going to read your emails at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. We're going to read your Apple Podcast questions, and we're going to talk Week 1 DFS. I hope you are listening to the Fantasy Football Today DFS podcast. More on that in a moment. Let's bring in Frank Stampfl. What's up, Frank? How you doing, man?
Yo, what's going on, Adam? Great introduction. I appreciate that. There's one great analyst here, and then there's Frank Stampfl. So you'll get a lot of advice here from Nejad, and it's nice to be on this side of the table. Honestly, I'm very excited.
It's oh man, being an analyst is so much more fun than being a host.
100%.
The occasional times when I get to be on the other side of the table, it's just like, this is so easy. Sia is also here. Sorry, Frank. Sia is on the Fantasy Football Today DFS podcast with Frank. Welcome, Sia.
You can see why I like doing shows with Frank, because he just fills me up with confidence with all the compliments. So, Frank, thank you for that. I'll see if I can live up to that compliment.
He's a complimenter. He's a very nice guy, for sure. We've got some news and notes to get to. We've got a Wayne Gallman update. I know everybody likes that. And some Week 1 stuff, but this is mostly going to be a mailbag show. Anybody got any drafts left?
Yeah, I have my 2 home league drafts this week, and we're recording this on Friday. I have one Friday night, and then I have one on Sunday morning as well. And I'm probably going to do another high stakes league, something on NFFC. I haven't figured out the date yet. Maybe Wednesday night, like right before the season starts.
Okay. Yeah, I've got 2 drafts to go, one Tuesday night, one Wednesday night. The Wednesday night one usually takes place in Vegas, but because of certain COVID issues, we decided to stay local. But I'm looking, that's my quote higher stakes league. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Where do you draft in Vegas?
Yeah, so we get a big suite, actually one that's not super expensive usually at like the Vdara, for example. They have these kind of big, almost like business-oriented suites that you can get, which have several bedrooms. And it's actually a pretty reasonable price because the Vdara isn't actually attached to a casino. It's next to a casino, but it's not attached to one. So it's a little bit more reasonable. And it's a perfect place to draft. These rooms are like 1,600 square feet. You get 4 or 5 guys in on it, and you're not paying much at all.
Wow, you could definitely be a salesman for the Vdara, by the way. That was I like.
Do they sponsor us? Whoops.
Just walk. Like, yeah, I can walk to a casino. I can walk across the street. It's not really a problem. All right, let's get to it, guys. Here are your news and notes. Carson Wentz, Ryan Kelly, Zach Pascal, all off the reserve COVID list. Now, these are news items as of Friday afternoon, so there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen between now and the time you listen. Just keep that in mind. Carson Wentz is optimistic about playing Week 1. Atlanta signed Wayne Gallman. Yeah. Anytime something happens with Wayne Gallman, people just think I'm like over the moon because I get to play the music. And they're right. Does anybody see this as a threat to Mike Davis? In fact, Heath, Jamie, both picked up Wayne Gallman. I was asleep at the wheel, or not really. I was just asleep. Not really thinking about this. But I probably should have picked up Wayne Gallman. He's not the worst player to add right now. Does anybody think this is a threat, Frank, to Mike Davis?
I don't think it's necessarily a threat. I think they were always going to use a second running back to some capacity. Mike Davis, obviously, the 1A there for the Atlanta Falcons. We know Arthur Smith coming over from the Tennessee Titans. He loved to run the ball with Derrick Henry. He does not have a Derrick Henry in Atlanta. So I think this is going to be some kind of tandem. Maybe not so much early on as Wayne Gallman kind of gets up to speed here, but I think as the season goes along, he's definitely going to work his way in, and he's a serviceable backup. We've seen that before. He's fine. I think in some deeper leagues, I did a draft back in mid-August where I have Quadri Allison. So I'm going to be dropping him and hopefully adding Wayne Gallman as a Mike Davis handcuff.
Okay. Saquon Barkley and Kenny Golladay practiced, and both are optimistic about playing in Week 1. Kenny Golladay basically admitting the Giants offense could get off to a slow start because of all the injuries, which, that's very refreshing. Sia, what is your Week 1 take on Barkley or Golladay or these questionable Giants going up against a good Broncos team? Probably a good Broncos defense, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not very optimistic. Obviously, if it's DFS, I'm not playing him at all. But if I have them in my year-long leagues, I feel like if you sprung on Saquon Barkley, you almost feel like you have to play him unless you really went heavy with the depth at running back, and then maybe you can sit him depending on what you think his pitch count is going to be. I think come Sunday, when that game starts, I think we're going to get a really good idea of how many snaps, how much volume he might get. And you're just going to have to make that decision Sunday morning. But I don't think it's out of the question at this point that you might have to sit Saquon Barkley, depending on what we hear.
Fifth most expensive running back on FanDuel, so I don't see a reason to pay up for him there. Carolina claimed Royce Freeman. Frank, do you think this is a threat to Christian no. Curtis Samuel expected to play week 1. See, as a Washington football team fan, this guy has dropped so much in average draft position. You could get him, round 11 in some drafts, Curtis Samuel. Chris Towers, his bold prediction is that Curtis Samuel will be better than McLaurin, I think it was. No, I don't think that's going to happen, but still, people are just forgetting about him. What do you think about Curtis Samuel?
Yeah, I think they are forgetting about him a little bit. Obviously, if he's going in round 11, that's probably way too late. But there are other weapons to consider there. Obviously you got McLaurin, Logan Thomas sucks up a lot of targets. Antonio Gibson's going to be catching passes. J.D. McKissick's still on that team. So the problem with Curtis Samuel is we're not exactly sure how Ron Rivera and company are going to use him. But I totally agree with you. If you have him sitting there in the 9th round, he's a great value. Would I take him in the 8th? With what receivers are usually there in the 8th? Probably not. But in the 9th or 10th, absolutely.
Yeah, last ADP I saw for Samuel was around 130th overall. Giovanni Bernard has a mild high ankle sprain, but apparently he's expected to be back for week 1. They have a Thursday night game against Dallas. Brandon Ayuk still out with a hamstring injury. And Tony Romo loves Zach Wilson. Tony Romo thinks that Wilson is going to be in the discussion of one of the top 3 to 5 quarterbacks pretty quickly. He thinks he kind of compared him to Patrick Mahomes. So it's interesting. Nobody's really drafting Wilson as a potential rookie year fantasy star. I don't think you should, but if you're in a dynasty league, I thought the fact that he was probably, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think going 4th among quarterbacks, he was definitely behind Lawrence and Fields and Lance.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Just because he's not going to run as much, you might have gotten a bargain with Zach Wilson. We will see. All right, Frank, tell me about the Fantasy Today DFS podcast.
Yeah, so in season, we're going to be dropping the podcast Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. The Tuesday podcast, more often than not, is going to be a look back on the week and kind of things that we learned, things that maybe mistakes that we made, things that we did right, and an early look ahead to the slate. We'll take a look at some salaries. But on Thursday, that's when we're really going to get into the games. We're going to go deeper into the stats, give you the players that we like, the stacks that we like, the players that we're looking to fade. So Tuesday, more of a recap, early look ahead, and then Thursday will be a really, really deep dive into all of the games. And you can find that Fantasy Football Today DFS.
And see, are you going to be able to sort of, how do you project roster percentage? Which players are going to be rostered or started in, not started, but rostered in a lot of DFS lineups and whatnot?
Well, initially you can ballpark it when salaries come out just by looking at salaries and looking at game totals. So, I think a lot of times we'll see a high game total. Like let's take the Arizona Cardinals and the Tennessee Titans. And we can kind of, that's, I think, like a 51.5 game total. The Chiefs and the Browns are 53 for week 1. So you can kind of ballpark where you think the ownership's going to be. But I'll tell you, I believe Sportsline is going to have some ownership as well. So when we're doing our FFT DFS show Tuesday, well, we won't have ownership that early. Kind of no one will. And if they do, it's wrong. Thursday, though, I think we'll have some indication as maybe, where the shares are going, where the ownership is going. And then we can kind of, tell the audience, hey, maybe these guys are some guys to fade because of ownership. Maybe this is chalk to, quote, eat regardless of ownership, that kind of thing.
Okay. Later on in the show, after we do the emails and the Apple Podcast questions, we're going to talk more DFS, general strategies, week 1 stuff. That's coming up a little bit later. Let's start with your Apple Podcast questions from Grant Witcher. I tried to follow the great or late tight end strategy in my first draft, and I ended up with Evan Ingram in the 12th round, and now I really want an upgrade. It is a 12-team super flex league, and I can trade Ingram and Josh Allen for Aaron Rodgers and Mark Andrews. It's super flex. So Ingram and Allen for Rodgers and Andrews. My other quarterback is Jalen Hurts, and is that Taysom Hill? Is it worth it to do this, or do I ride with Ingram and possibly end up streaming all year?
I think this comes down to who's available on your waiver wire right now. So I would like to know that. On the surface, it seems like a pretty fair trade. Obviously, going from Josh Allen to Aaron Rodgers is a downgrade, but I think going from Evan Ingram to Mark Andrews is a substantial upgrade. So it's a fair deal. I would want to know who's on your waiver wire, but if you don't want to worry about streaming tight ends all year, Mark Andrews is just a plug and play. He's going to be in your lineup every single week. Originally, I was a little bit worried about Andrews this year because I like Rashad Bateman, the player. I think he's going to be awesome. But the fact that he's missing the first month, I think Andrews kind of steps in. He's the top target in this offense. They use him in the red zone right away. I would take this trade, so you don't have to worry about streaming tight ends.
So I got to push back just a little bit here because I do think Josh Allen is maybe a little bit too valuable. The thing about Evan Ingram is he did practice in full pads. I think it was either this morning or yesterday. So I think there was some question with respect to his injury. I don't like Evan Ingram either. Of course, I agree that Mark Andrews is better in several different ways. But one thing to consider with Aaron Rodgers is that David Bakhtiari is on PUP and he's not going to play, I guess, the first 6 games. So the best pass blocking left tackle in the entire league is not there for Aaron Rodgers. So I think you might just slot Rodgers down just a touch. And I just think Josh Allen is too strong here. I'd take the risk with Ingram or the streaming personally.
Yeah, the Bakhtiari thing is interesting. He played without Bakhtiari for, I think, 6 games last year. I think 7, actually. I think 5 regular season and 2 postseason. And Rodgers tore it up. He was great without Bakhtiari. But that doesn't mean it will happen again. It still is a major injury. There's no question. They also don't have last year's center, Corey Linsley. The Packers are probably going to be starting 2 rookies on their offensive line. So, yeah, that is a strike against him. As far as the greater late tight end strategy goes, it's catchy. It's great. But last night, Thursday night, I drafted, and Gerald Everett is my starting tight end, and I hate that. I just missed out on Kyle Pitts in the 5th round. I just missed out on Tyler Higbee in like the 9th round or something. I would have been happy with that. These guys went 1 or 2 picks before me. So I have Gerald Everett and I have Evan Ingram, and I hate it. But I am pretty solid everywhere else. And I don't want to repeat this too much as I talked about this on yesterday's show, but what I really have learned through the years is that Vance McDonald was a guy that we were excited about as like tight end 8 in ADP or something a few years ago. And it's just, this is such a horrible position that I'm not going to pass up a guy like Devontae Smith or something like that to take Tyler Higbee. I'd rather just stream the position, and I'm not going to pass up players at other positions that I think can be great. So that's why I'm at greater late, because you get, oh, well, I can get Tyler Higbee. He'll be fine. I can get Gerald Everett. The Everett you can get super late. But Jonnu Smith, the odds of them really making an impact to me are very low. And they won't be that much better than the waiver wire pickups. So that's why I just kind of kept neglecting it and settled on Everett and Ingram and see what happens. And I'll be fine streaming, but I loaded up at other positions.
Adam, break the tie. Would you take the trade?
I would do the trade. I would do Andrews and Rodgers for Allen and Ingram. I would. But I see both sides. All right, from the steerage, 10-team half PPR, 1 quarterback, 2 receivers, 1 flex. I have the 10th pick, and the 2nd pick has offered me a trade. It's his. So this, by the way, is a dynasty draft. I'm sorry. I think that, yeah, it is. So he has the 10th pick, and he's been offered the number 2 pick for his rounds 1 and 2 pick, and a running back of his choosing. He would trade up to number 2, and he would get Kyle Pitts. What do you think about that? Like giving up pick 10. I think this is a dynasty league. So pick 10 in.
So is this a rookie draft then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so giving up pick 10 and 11. So that's the swing pick in a 10-team league dynasty.
I mean, it might be pick 110 and 210.
Okay, yeah, it could be 210. For Kyle Pitts and an RB of my choosing. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, I mean, look, Kyle Pitts is one of those, we were just talking about tight ends, and I think that he has the best chance of those mid-tier tight ends, Pitts, Andrews, and TJ Hawkinson, to move into that elite territory. By next year, we could be drafting him as a 2nd or 3rd round pick in redraft. I really do think that's possible for him. So for years to come, I mean, by next year, he might be the number 1 tight end in Dynasty. He might already be. I know Heath has his Dynasty ranking. So yeah, I would do it to get Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. From 5426, I hear a lot of concerns about Josh Jacobs, but I haven't heard much about Kenyon Drake. In non-PPR, is Jacobs bad at the 3-4 turn? And what is Drake going to take away? Sia, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, Jacobs is probably bad on the 3-4 turn. I think it depends on who's there, but I'm completely off Jacobs. Okay, a couple things. One is Drake got paid 2 years, $11 million guaranteed, with the opportunity to get up to $14 million, which means he's making, just for the record, this doesn't matter too much because Josh Jacobs is still on his rookie contract, but he makes twice as much money as Josh Jacobs. But any running back that's getting $11 million guaranteed for 2 years is going to have a role. Like clearly the Raiders like him. So I think they're going to use him quite a bit. And I think he could be vulturing more work from Josh Jacobs than people think. Oh, and by the way, about a half an hour ago, the Raiders signed Peyton Barber. And I know as a Washington football fan, the only reason you use Peyton Barber is to take away touches in the red zone from Antonio Gibson. Well, the new Antonio Gibson is Josh Jacobs. It's just not a good setup for Josh Jacobs. I mean, he's going to have a couple games where he has a couple touchdowns here and there, but there's too much volume to go around with Peyton Barber and newly minted Kenyon Drake.
Okay. From Tyler, what are your thoughts on having Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown on the same team? I have a trade in place. I can give up A.J. Brown to get Keenan Allen.
No, I would rather have A.J. Brown. I know it's tough to put all your eggs in one basket, per se, with the Tennessee Titans, but I mean, those are two super elite level players. So I kind of just look the other way on something like that, and I would keep Henry and A.J. Brown.
All right, next one is from Toral C. Hey, Laszlo, Nandor, and Guillermo.
Let's go, Adam. The new season is out on Hulu. I haven't watched anything yet, but I'm probably gonna dip my toes in the water this weekend.
Is it not on FX?
Is it? But it's on Hulu, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't have Hulu, but I have FX. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I believe it's aired on FX, but they added to Hulu.
Okay.
Or at least I'm hoping so.
So
the shadows.
For the people like me that don't know what you're talking about, what is this?
This is what we do in the shadows. I think it's such a funny show. It's I love it.
You have to watch it. It's kind of like filmed in the Office style of a sitcom, but it's vampires. It's hilarious.
Very fun.
Okay.
All right, PPR 10-team league. I get Lamar Jackson and Kareem Hunt. I give up Ryan Tannehill and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And he would still have Eckler and Mike Davis as a starting running backs. He'd give up Lamar Jackson and Kareem Hunt. No. He'd get Lamar Jackson and Kareem Hunt. He'd give up Tannehill and Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
That's
a no. That's a no for me, dog.
That's pretty close, but I would keep Tannehill and Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, I think I probably would too, because I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire upside. Like I don't know what his floor is, but I know his upside is pretty high. So I think I'd probably hang on to that.
Also, he has Julio Jones as one of his wide receivers, so he has that connection with Tannehill now.
The stack. All right, Celeste in the land of the lobster roll.
I don't know anything about geography or anything like this. So when you normally throw this stuff Dave Richards' way and he just knows it, because I mean the guy's a genius. I have no idea. Where do they eat lobster rolls?
Maryland? I don't know. Maine. Lobster rolls are Maine.
All right.
Cupcakes I know are Maryland.
You say so, I believe you.
Well, Google says so. All right. Celeste from Maine needs trade advice. Full PPR 10-team league. Should I trade Gus Edwards to get Aaron Rodgers straight up? At running back, I have Eckler, Aaron Jones, Mostert, and Jamal Williams. At quarterback, I have Jalen Hurts and Trey Lance.
No.
Also no.
Yeah, I say no. I mean, I draft Edwards ahead of Rodgers, so.
I love Jalen Hurts, too. I'd say what you want about him as a passer, but, I mean, we've talked about him on the DFS podcast a few times already. He's gonna run a ton. I think he can run for 1,000 yards. So if you miss out on that Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson group, I think Jalen Hurts is that next one up in terms of rushing potential. And
Gus Edwards is the number one running back on a team that rushed for 192 yards a game last year. So I don't care who it is. You could it could be Gus Edwards, which is like the most normal name ever. You could literally say the guy's like Tom Jones or whatever it is. And I'd be like, I don't know who he is, but he's got a great opportunity. Gus has a great opportunity.
Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about Gus Edwards, and it's full PPR, so that hurts, but don't do the trade. All right, from Drickus. I have Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Melvin Gordon, A.J. Dillon, and Tony Pollard. All right, Kamara, Aaron Jones, Melvin Gordon, A.J. Dillon, Tony Pollard. It's half PPR. Not sure how I got Aaron Jones and Kamara, but I did. Good job. I'm not sure either. Good job. Should I drop one of the running backs to pick up Xavier Jones Jr.? Now, he means Tony Jones, so let's just make sure it's Tony Jones. Should I drop one of the running backs to handcuff Kamara with Tony Jones? So obviously you're not dropping Kamara or Jones or AJ Dillon. So would you drop Melvin Gordon or Tony Pollard for Tony Jones?
I wouldn't. I mean, we don't even know for sure that Tony Jones, I know they said it on the preseason broadcast, but Latavius Murray is still on the team as far as I've seen. I know that there was a lot of cuts that happened this week. So he's still there. I think, if anything happened to Kamara, it's probably they're going to use both of those running backs. And if something happens to Zeke, Tony Pollard is instantly a top 10 running back. So I'd rather have him.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right, Percy Harvin, 12. 10-team full PPR league. Only have to start one running back, one receiver, one tight end, but there are 5 flexes. Should I just focus on drafting as many wide receivers as possible and not prioritize running back, seeing how I only have to start one a week?
100% in full PPR.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm like 84% on that, Fred. I'm not quite as gung-ho.
Well, there's a lot of pass catching running backs. So, I mean, I think you might get value created there regardless at the running back position because of that mindset. But I mean, the problem is receivers so deep. I mean, you go to like between like 60 and 100 overall, and you're still getting high quality receivers. So I think you could maybe load up a little bit on running back early and maybe take advantage of some people who are loading up on wide receiver, not realizing that there's plenty of good talent at wide receiver later as well.
Adam, I know you talk about this a lot on the podcast, and you brought up multiple times this draft season how, we're often drafting the 9th or 10th running back where we're drafting the 3rd wide receiver. And in full PPR, I mean, the value just doesn't add up. I mean, we're usually doing that because we have to start 2 running backs. In a situation like this where you only need to start 1 and you have 5 flex options, maybe I jumped the gun. 100% is too much. But if running back falls to a good value in your draft, sure, you could take one and throw them in the flex. You have to completely look the other way. But I just think that there's so many awesome wide receivers, especially like that top tier, the top 20 to 30, that I would look that way in a league like this.
Yeah, I don't know that it would change my first round all that much. It would probably push Adams and maybe it would push like the top 5 receivers up a little bit. But I guess I would say the reason why we take 10 running backs before we take, a 3rd wide receiver is because we still think a guy like Saquon Barkley has, 25 point per game upside or something. And no wide receiver really does in PPR. So I think once you run out of the guys who can really be true superstars, then you could pivot to being more like you don't have to take Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Keenan Allen or something like, which I don't know that I do anyway, but I'm still the first 10 or so running backs that I still think have a chance to be true superstars. I don't know if there are 10, but they're close.
To me, I'm looking at the ADP the last week on NFFC. To me, the cutoff is 13. So once you get into like Saquon, Gibson, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, that group, right after that, you have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, David Montgomery, James Robinson. Those guys are fine, but for me, that top 13 that ends with Mixon, Harris, Gibson, that's kind of where I would draw the cutoff line.
And I don't really think Mixon and Gibson are in that. I think they're just after Harris and Barkley. And, I don't think they're quite superstar potential, but a lot of people do. So that's fine. All right. A few more here from Apple, from RI Lighthouse. I have McCaffrey as a keeper in a 10-team half PPR league. Who should I take with the 5th pick? Barkley, Eckler, or Kelsey?
Have McCaffrey, Barkley.
Half PPR, 10 teams.
I would take Kelsey is tempting there because then you just have that elite tight end. I would still go with Austin Eckler.
Yeah, it's between Eckler or Kelsey for sure. My lean is always going to be with the running back there, but I mean, I wouldn't argue with Kelsey, but I would probably take Eckler as well.
Orchids of Asia has a 12-team PPR league, 2 flexes, and it's okay. So it's 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, kicker, and a defense, and an IDP, 1 defensive back and 1 linebacker. So 2 IDPs. Not exactly the deepest roster. It's pretty standard, I guess. How important is it that I get a top IDP player? You guys have any IDP experience or thoughts?
I don't. I would love to play in an IDP league. I haven't really had the opportunity to do so, but seeing as how you only start 1 defensive back and 1 linebacker, I don't think there's going to be as much of an emphasis put on that early in your draft. So I think once you get into like the middle rounds, maybe you start to look at it, but I think the difference makers are going to last pretty long because you're only starting 2 IDPs here.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I would say this, that, you all probably know, I don't know if you were listening, but the 1 IDP league I play in starts 9 IDPs. It's crazy. And we have 10 bench spots on top of that. So I don't really care that much about the IDPs. They just don't make that much of a difference. It's a full PPR league and they obviously don't benefit from that. It's a 6 point per passing touchdown league. They just don't, like I said, the top scoring IDP last year scored as many points as Todd Gurley, basically.
Ew.
So I was just like, I'm not going to invest too much in it. So I got, I think, Zaven Collins at one point, and then my last 8 picks were my other IDPs. We'll see how it turns out. But in this format, I would prioritize it a little bit more because you can make a difference with your IDP spots. It's a bigger percentage of your fantasy points, I think, in this scenario. And, there aren't as many just like interchangeable parts like there are in my IDP league. So what I would do, and I'm not the best at this, I don't really know the tiers that well. I would do some research and figure out how many elite defensive linemen there are, how many elite defensive backs there are. There's probably like 6 and 6 or something. Who knows? Something like, I think it's probably going to be around there, and try to get one of those. I would not be the last person in your league to take an IDP at both spots. I would try to get an elite one, like pretend, for example, you pretend this is quarterback and tight end, and you want a top 5 or 6 quarterback, and you want one of those 6 tight ends. That's kind of how I would approach it with IDPs, except they're going to go later in the draft. And that is it for Apple Podcasts. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we got some awesome emails, fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. Back after this. Welcome back. Adam Azer with Frank Stampfl and Nejad, talking DFS in just a little bit. Here's an email from Brad in a city south of Nashville. I'm going to give you all the geography ones, Frank.
Let's go with
Mobile, Alabama.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking.
That better be south of Nashville. I don't know. Wait, yeah, that's south of Nashville.
I was going to say Cancun. It's technically south there.
Yeah. Cancun is for sure. Okay. Hey, Brian, Darren, Dion, and LaShawn.
Those would be Eagles running backs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Miles Sanders is a guy I think is being penalized because he failed to deliver on lofty expectations. Basically, this is just a what do you think about Miles Sanders question. And you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to go to my 2 quarterback league, and I'm going to offer my Josh Jacobs straight up for Miles Sanders and see what happens. Because I'm sick of this Miles Sanders. I'm sick of this Miles slanders. Okay?
Nice.
This Miles Sanders slander is pissing me off. We have not seen him in the preseason. They sat him. Basically, he played barely anything because he's a starter, and they value him. The other guys on the team are not better running backs than him. Kenneth Gainwell is going to be a 3rd down back, perhaps. Boston Scott will get in the mix. Miles Sanders is their best running back. He had 3 carries of more than 70 yards last year. Running backs just don't do that. So he's going to be their goal line guy. Of course, I'm guessing about all of this, but I feel confident. I like him better than Josh Jacobs. I think we've gone too far. What do you guys think?
This is perfect because I'll let Sia take it. I know that he's all over Miles Sanders. This emailer also brings up Raheem Mostert in the email. So, Sia, if you want to talk about both of those guys, I know you like both of them a lot.
Well, check out FFT DFS for almost every show. I say something about Raheem Mostert, especially from a DFS standpoint. But I'll say this: I think Miles Sanders. It's a classic case of recency bias. It's just what people see and they just glom onto it and they're like, well, this must be what's going to happen week 1, week 2, week 3, and so on. Miles Sanders is a really good running back. And to Adam's point, he's so much better than everybody else on the roster, including Kenny Gainwell. By the way, he played, I think, only in 12 games last year, behind a very banged up, injured, bad offensive line, and still averaged 5.3 yards per carry. I know Adam loves YPC. And by the way, the crisscross references during the draft-a-thon were priceless, Adam. But no, I totally agree about Miles Sanders. I think Miles Sanders is going extremely undervalued. Can he flop? I guess, but a lot of these running backs that are outside of the top 10 absolutely have some question marks next to them. And I think Miles Sanders is potentially a league winner for people.
And I think something else that people haven't really taken into account is that the fact that he's going to be playing alongside Jalen Hurts, where we've seen this all throughout, the past really decade, right? Or really since Michael Vick has come into the league, because he's kind of changed the position. But anytime a running back has played alongside a rushing quarterback, it opens up running lanes. It makes things more efficient for that player. So if the offensive line is better, which it's expected to be, the offense overall should be better. They bring in Devontae Smith. They still have both tight ends. Jalen Hurts is going to be running. That opens up running lanes for Miles Sanders. I agree. I mean, I think people have gone too far the other way. I was never in on him as like a 3rd round pick when that was happening, but now he's being pushed all the way down into like the 5th round. So if you get him as your RB2 there, sure, why not?
Mhm.
I am going to take Gus Edwards over him, but I was on the clock and I was like Jacobs or Sanders, and I would think I was doing a FFT and 5 podcast at the time, and so I took Jacobs and I regretted it, and I made the trade offer. Let's see if George Maselli accepts. I make a lot of trades with George, so I have some confidence here. Next email is from Dave. In a 2-receiver non-PPR league, you don't need to take a wide receiver until round 5 or later. That's all it says. 2-receiver non-PPR league, you don't need to take a wide receiver until round 5 or later.
That's true.
I don't know if it's necessarily round 5. I would probably try to get 3 running backs in my first 4 or 5 picks in a non-PPR league. But if that means taking a wide receiver in round 3, like a Terry McLaurin or one of the Cowboys guys, something like that, I would be okay with that. I mean, I would still, even in a non-PPR league, I would want a top 12 to 15 wide receiver on my team if I can afford to do so. But yeah, I mean, the first 2 picks, I'm probably looking at running back in this kind of format, and then probably trying to add another one as my flex, maybe in like the 4th or 5th.
Yeah, and I agree. I like to take one of the top 8 receivers with one of my first two picks. But to his point, you don't need to do it. And I think what he's trying to say is, yeah, I mean, Frank and I might have a different drafting strategy, but if you were to go quarterback and tight end early and grab 3 elite running backs, for example, you can get away with filling out your roster at the receiver position with guys like Robbie Anderson, potentially Chase Claypool, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman. I mean, I could literally name Tyler Boyd, Michael Gallup. Like, I can name 10 or 15 more guys that if you're elite at other places and you're taking shots at upside rounds 5 or later for your next, let's say 5 picks, a few of those are definitely going to pan out. And you're looking at a team with a ton of upside.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. If we talk about like the hero RB or the anchor RB in a PPR league, you take one running back later and you kind of load up early, first round, second round, and you kind of load up at other positions. I think I actually could see doing, hero wide receiver in a non-PPR league, because I do think there's a pretty big separation between guys from Adams to say like AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf. Let's say the top 8 wide receivers in non-PPR. It's deeper in full PPR because you can throw Keenan Allen, Allen Robinson, and McLaurin in there. I don't know how many touchdowns McLaurin's going to score. I want one of them. I really do. But yeah, I don't have any non-PPR drafts. I have one non-PPR league, but it's a dynasty league. And, look, having good receivers. I have Stephon Diggs, Terry McLaurin, and Robert Woods in that league. It really helps, even though it's non-PPR. So I wouldn't neglect it completely, but you can definitely focus on running back. From Todd, not intended, but I waited on running back, and I feel like this is a good team. 10-team PPR, 10th pick. Okay, so for those of you who have a late pick in a 10-team PPR league, this is what your team could look like if you pass on running back. He took Mahomes and Hill. We would never take Mahomes in the top 10, but a lot of people would. So Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, that's fun. A.J. Brown and Keenan Allen with picks 3 and 4. DeAndre Swift, and he passed on Carson. Yikes. Gus Edwards, Sanders, Gaskin, Jacobs. Okay, so he took Swift. Okay. And Kyle Pitts. So at this point, he has Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown, Keenan Allen, Kyle Pitts, and DeAndre Swift. Then he took Henderson and Mostert. Then he took Trey Sermon and Sutton. I think that's terrific.
Yeah.
I do think that having Mahomes and Hill is awesome to have that combo, but the opportunity cost of taking Mahomes there, it's you missed out on getting an elite running back. So, I mean, I would have done that personally, taking a running back there with Tyreek Hill, because, yeah, while you wound up with Swift and Henderson and Mostert, and hopefully one of those players emerges, it's a 10-team league, so you kind of want to stand out at positions as best as you can. And if you're behind the pack and running back, I just don't love doing that myself. So I probably would have, instead, I would have taken a running back in the first 2 rounds, and then where you took Swift or Henderson or Mostert, you probably could have still gotten a really, really strong quarterback there. So it's just the opportunity cost of taking Mahomes that early.
Yeah, I agree. I think he made a mistake with Mahomes, but I do think he kind of made up for it with the running backs that he got. I like how he tried to secure the 49ers backfield with Mostert and Sermon. Just one watch out there is Jeff Wilson probably will be back by week 7. So that's going to be a lot more muddled, assuming everybody's healthy come the middle of the season there.
Okay, and yes, you also have a team name behind the pack at running back. So good job, Frank. This is from Alan. 10-team PPR. Can you weigh in on later round strategy? Do you take still handcuffs and upside players, or do you pick stronger positional players since the pool of players will be there in a 10-team PPR league? Yeah, that's a good question. Do you still take handcuffs in 10-team leagues? And I'm going to pull up a 10-team draft. It was a super flex draft, but I'll pull up a 10-team draft we did last night for reference. Go ahead, Frank, or see if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, I think in a 10-team league, again, you're trying to separate as best as you can. So I think I probably look the other way on handcuffs there, and I'm probably just trying to grab as much upside as I possibly can. And it depends what you do early on, right? So if you're a little bit more running back heavy, maybe you take more shots on wide receivers late in your draft to see if you can find a gem that kind of just like pops off early in the season and becomes this breakout player. If you take wide receivers early, maybe you do the opposite. And you don't necessarily have to take the handcuff on your team. Earlier, we talked about A.J. Dillon and Tony Pollard. Aaron Jones, as great as he is, he's been injury prone. If something happens to him, A.J. Dillon has league-winning upside. Ezekiel Elliott has been pretty durable in his career, but if something happens there, Tony Pollard, I believe, has top 10 running back upside. So you don't necessarily have to take the handcuffs for your team, but just take the highest upside handcuffs is, I guess, the point.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love taking handcuffs of other teams too, because it becomes really good trade leverage. If you want to throw that handcuff in, let's say week 3 or week 4 with something a little bit more valuable to get something back. I think a lot of people really they get really nervous that they don't have the handcuff and they give up a little bit more than they should.
Yeah, looking at our draft last night, again, it was super flex, but it was still 16 rounds. So, that's probably like a 14 round 10-team league without the super flex. You still have a mix of Mike Williams, Elijah Moore, some backup tight ends, but then you have a Tyson Williams and Alexander Madison mixed in with Mecole Hardman and Henry Ruggs. So whatever suits your team. But
yeah, those are all great picks late. Great.
Right. And just talking a little bit more on 10-team leagues, Adam, I know that recently you guys did a podcast on strategy. How does it change 10-team versus 12-team and 14-team and 16-team? And Jamie brought up a really good point in that you want to differentiate yourself at quarterback and tight end. So if it means reaching on those positions a little bit earlier in your 10-team league to make sure that you can compete with other teams, it's worth it to do that rather than maybe just drafting a quarterback late and that you're going to have all this depth on your team, running back, wide receiver depth. It's so hard to make these 2-for-1, 3-for-1 trades in 10-team leagues because everyone's team is stacked. So you think that, I might have this awesome depth. Like, I could just make a trade at some point in the season. It's not that easy. Like, I've played in 10-team leagues and, I have this awesome bench, but more often than not, people don't want to make like 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 trades in those type of leagues.
Yeah, interesting. And Heath and I shared the team in the podcast for the People League. We had the 7th pick, and our first 2 picks were Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson.
I saw that on Twitter. That is hot, as you would call it.
Yeah, it was hot. And I just you know what? This may not be smart, but it's fun. Let's just go have fun. Let's see what we're going to do.
That is fun.
Okay, next question is from Zach. Dear Steve, Eddie, Frank, and Derek. At first, I was thinking this is Family Matters, but I think this is actually Tennessee Titans.
I started thinking Tennessee Titans as well.
Steve McNair, Eddie George, Frank, and Derek. Oh, Derek is
and Derrick Henry.
Yeah, but
no, exactly. He spelled it differently. That's
then I'm not sure.
We are failing.
No, yeah, Frank Wycheck. That's what I was thinking. It's got to be Frank. That's why I thought it was Titans. All right. Anyway, 12-team PPR and pick 8. What am I doing? Grading this team? Okay, grade the team. 12-team PPR, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, and 2 flex. Dak Prescott, Aaron Jones, Melvin Gordon. That's the one. I know Heath drafted him yesterday in a 0 RB approach. I just cannot get excited about that, but okay. Aaron Jones, Melvin Gordon, Dak Prescott, Ridley, Lamb, Julio, Judy, Pittman, Kyle Pitts. He also has A.J. Dillon, Devin Singletary, J.D. McKissick on his bench, and Savon Ahmed and some others. What do you guys think about this team? It's pretty damn good for a 12-team league.
Mm-hmm.
It is pretty good. I will give it a B+ with the obvious downside is the RB2 being Melvin Gordon, but considering it's a full PPR, You have great wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, CeeDee Lamb. You have the hookup there with Lamb and Dak Prescott. Julio Jones is your wide receiver 3. Jerry Jeudy as your 4. He's going to be one of your flex options. That is awesome. And then you have Kyle Pitts, who I'm all over. I think, again, he could have elite upside. So, B+ for me. We'll figure out the RB2.
Yeah, I agree.
Tim from Denver. I have the 8th pick in a 12-team half PPR league. I'm hoping to pair a first-round running back with Hopkins or Ridley. I have Ridley ranked higher, but sometimes Kyle Pitts and Mike Davis make it back to me in round 5. I like both of them, but I don't love having 2 starters on the same team. Do you ever take that into consideration?
I think, we answered earlier with the Titans having A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry. I think it's a little bit different when you're talking about the Atlanta Falcons, and then we're getting into players who, with Mike Davis, where he's not really an elite player like A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry are. So Ridley and Pitts, I think I would be all right with, but once you get into Ridley and Mike Davis, I don't know if I want that many shares of the Falcons offense. So I think it's team dependent. The Titans, I'm all right with it.
Yeah, it's definitely team dependent.
I don't know. I mean, it depends. Do you really think Hopkins, a lot of people have Hopkins ahead of Ridley. If you like Ridley a lot more, I'm not going to mess with my 2nd round pick because of my potential 5th round pick.
Correct. You know what I mean? That's the way to look at it. So just take whoever you have ranked higher personally. And I would take Ridley over Hopkins, but it is very close.
All right, this is from Bryce from Columbia, South Carolina. Go Gamecocks. When you do your drafts, do you intentionally diversify your different teams to give yourself more possible outcomes of great teams? Or do most of your teams end up looking similar with a lot of the same players?
I try not to think about what I drafted previously. And so usually what that ends up meaning is that I usually have a lot of overlap. I mean, if you have different draft positions, that's probably not going to happen until the later rounds. Maybe you'll pick some of the same guys, but I really, people do fantasy for fun. So, I mean, I think diversifying makes sense. I can tell you from a DFS standpoint, you don't want to, you're doing this weekly, and that's diversification enough because you have new teams each week. So, if you believe in certain players, you need to play those certain players. So I think in year long, it makes sense to diversify. I don't really try to do that. For example, a couple of the drafts that I've done, bigger drafts that I've done, I've got Jonathan Taylor in both. I've got Calvin Ridley in both. It just turned out that way because I didn't try to consider the other drafts.
Yeah, so I usually do a good amount of drafts, and I would say diversify early on in your drafts if you can, because it's hard. It's like hindsight is 2020. Last year, I had the first pick in 3 of my most important, expensive leagues. I took Christian McCaffrey in all of them, and it absolutely crushed me. But I mean, I think you ask anyone, they would have taken Christian McCaffrey first overall. So I don't think that's necessarily a great example, but if you have mid-round picks and you want to diversify, all right, I'll take Austin Eckler in one, I'll take Aaron Jones in another. I would diversify early, but if you have mid-round targets or late-round targets that you love and you feel really passionate about, I would say make sure to get all those players on all of your teams.
Yeah, and then I would just say if you have picks 5, 6, 7, 8 or something like that, 5, 6, 7 in several leagues, I wouldn't take Zeke in every league. I wouldn't take Aaron Jones in every league. I would probably, since I think those guys are pretty even, and I think they all have the same chance to be superstars, between Kelsey, those 2 running backs, Devontae Adams, I'd probably diversify there. But yeah, overall, just there's no right answer. Just have fun with it and draft your favorite players.
Adam, can I interrupt a second? Was that 5, 6, 7, 8? Was that a Laverne and Shirley reference or something else?
Just a music reference.
Okay. Well, you're too young for Laverne and Shirley. For everybody listening out there, that 5, 6, 7, 8 goes back to 80s sitcom trivia right there.
So. Oh, actually, I grew up watching Nick at Night every night, and I remember a little Laverne and Shirley. Not very clearly, but
the intro song has the 5, 6, 7, 8. Anyway,
how's the rest of the song go? Go ahead, sing it.
Well, it's the words after that are super confusing. It's like Schlemeagle, Schlemagle.
Okay, I know it is. Yeah. They did a parody of that in Wayne's World.
Oh, okay, that's
or
right.
Wayne's World 2 or whatever, whichever one it was. Okay. Last email here is from Aaron. I like to make the most of my bench running back upside stashes, guys who could get some work but are an injury away from being the waiver wire ad of the week. Looking for guys available on waivers in most leagues. The list I have so far is some mix of Jerick McKinnon, Justice Hill, Kenneth Gainwell, Tony Jones Jr., and Justin Jackson. How would you rank those guys in PPR? And who would you add to the list with them? And so this is players available on waivers. It's not AJ Dillon and Alexander Madison. They're drafted apparently in this league. But, who are your favorites from that list? McKinnon, Justice Hill, Gainwell, Tony Jones, Justin Jackson.
I think Kenny Gainwell stands out for me. I know we spoke about Miles Sanders. I do think Gainwell is going to have some kind of role. Maybe it's 4 to 6 touches early on. But if something happens to Sanders, I could see him gaining a bigger role. And then it's probably Justin Jackson. I know that we're still trying to figure out necessarily the depth behind Austin Eckler, but I think he's the next running back up for the Chargers. So I would go Gainwell and Jackson. McKinnon is interesting if anything happened to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But yeah.
I think I'd go Gainwell, Tony Jones, then probably Justin Jackson, then Jerick McKinnon. I would take Justice Hill off the list just because I think Tyson Williams has that number 2 job, and I don't think he's being drafted either. I think you could add Wayne Gallman to the list because we talked about it at the front end of the show, he's behind a 28, almost 29-year-old Mike Davis, who we're not really sure about. So I think that makes sense too.
I think Tyson Williams, by the way, is a great call, and he's probably someone who's available. And let's throw Wayne Gallman in that mix too, who we spoke about earlier.
Just said that, Frank.
Oh, my bad.
Come on,
I do that a lot on the baseball podcast. I'm looking off at rankings right now, and then I zone out and I don't listen. It's bad.
Only play Wayne Gallman in home games in the Dome at Atlanta because if there's a stiff breeze, he could potentially get knocked over.
That's the same thing with Kenneth Gainwell. The guy's 5'8". He's shorter than I am, or roughly the same height. But that's why he's not going to be their primary running back. Okay, DFS talk. So first things first, let's say I don't play DFS, Daily Fantasy Sports. I don't play on FanDuel or DraftKings or anything like that. Sell me on it. Give me your sales pitch, Sia. You already did it for that hotel in Vegas. So now do it for DFS.
Well, so the cool thing about DFS is, I obviously love year long and I love DFS. I think people should play both. DFS just gives you a little bit more. We used the word diversification earlier. You can kind of pick players depending on matchups a lot more. Like you're going to pick players in year long depending on matchups, but that's sort of within the confines of your own team. In DFS, you can just kind of look at games, look at matchups. Like for week 1, you got Arizona, Tennessee, or Philly, Atlanta, or the Chiefs and the Browns, or the Packers and the New Orleans Saints. These are high scoring games where you can just grab shares and kind of play GM just for a week. And you have the potential at big cash prizes if you want to play some of these big tournaments that are admittedly hard to win and hard to cash in, or you could play double ups and double your money, and usually around 50% gets paid in those. It's just another fun way to play fantasy football. It's obviously very popular with the advent of DraftKings and FanDuel. I can tell you for the last 7, 8, 9 years, I've been doing year-long and DFS, and they work really well together. And frankly, a lot of the DFS research really plays well with your year-long research and vice versa. So it's really good to kind of study and play both because it's going to help both avenues out.
I find myself not caring more, but following more closely my DFS lineups on Sunday than my season long. I don't know why that is. It might be because I have so many season long and I don't play quite as much DFS as the pros do. But it is really fun. It's really fun to just be able to put together these kind of dream teams and try to find those diamonds in the roughs, know the sleepers that have a low price. So with that, let's talk about just a little bit of general strategy, and then we'll turn it ahead to week 1. Frank, why don't you host this segment? You're the host of the DFS podcast. I'm gonna kick back.
All right, so look, we've basically done 8 podcasts at this point, Fantasy Football Today, DFS, and all of them, we've featured some kind of strategy segment. So you can go back and listen. You can listen to all that. But if we're just doing a little bit of a synopsis here, I would say the main points here that we hit on were figuring out your goals, playing within your means, right? So look, don't worry about what other experts and these big DFS players are doing and how much money they're putting in. Play however much you want to play and figure out what you want to do. If it's throwing a lineup in the Millie Maker every week, you have to realize you're probably not going to cash. But if that's what you want to do, if that's what you find fun, there's nothing wrong with that. And then the other things are, when it comes to lineup construction, we're paying close attention to stacking and correlations and things like that. So I would say for me, it's figure out your goals, play within your means. And then, once we get into actual players and stuff, it's kind of making sure that your lineups make sense is the correlation.
Yeah, and I'll add to that because you kept saying stacking and correlation. I think for especially the beginner, the person who's barely played NFL DFS or barely played DFS in general, there is a kind of a steep learning curve, at least at the beginning, which is why FFT DFS is probably really important for the listener who's maybe somewhat new to that, because the correlating your lineups or stacking your lineups, and stacking, of course, means you're stacking the same players on one side of the ball. And the correlation part is you're correlating that game, or you're correlating players in that game on the other side of the ball. You have things like secondary stacks to consider in other games that you think have high fantasy value or potential. You have the punts that you're going to pick apart from 1 or 2 games here and there. Just that whole process, and maybe the statistics to kind of look at, whether it's red zone target share or just sheer volume, touches, things of that nature. Those are all really helpful. And kind of once you get the hang of that, you can start to kind of see, well, where are the gold mines week to week.
And it's really fun to
let's get definitions here just for people. So let's do an example. Let's say I want to stack. Let's just do the Chiefs. Okay. Patrick Mahomes, week 1 against Cleveland, and Tyreek Hill or Kelsey, or like, give me what's a stack in this scenario and a combination.
So if you wanted to use Patrick Mahomes with Tyreek Hill, by the way, both of those players are very expensive. So this is a salary cap system that we're playing within. So you have to find players that are lower cost salary if you want to spend up on those. But basically, you take Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill, and then on the other side, you think this game is a shootout. The Browns are expected to be playing from behind. You correlate that game where you take a Browns pass catcher, someone like Jarvis Landry or Odell Beckham, and then next thing you know, if this game winds up being 42-35 and Patrick Mahomes threw 2 touchdowns to Tyreek Hill, Odell Beckham has a big game, then you have an opportunity to move up the standings by having correlated players within that same game.
Okay, yeah. So just want everybody to know, kind of just put it into an actual example. Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Odell Beckham. All right, you guys want to get into week 1 or what? Some of your favorite plays? Or?
Sure.
Okay, go for it.
So I think the focus initially, I mean, typically, salaries will come out on like a Tuesday, for example, and you'll kind of scan, what games you like, what salaries you like. I think the first step is usually looking at what games you like that you're going to want to concentrate on. So just a few that stick out to me. I mean, Philly, Atlanta is very interesting. Arizona, Tennessee is very interesting. These are all games that have a 48-point total or higher, by the way. Seattle, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and then you round it out with Kansas City, Cleveland, and New Orleans, Green Bay. So you want to kind of focus on that. That doesn't mean you can't grab players in other games. That doesn't mean there's not contrarian stacks you can play, like the Jets in Carolina. It's only got a 44-point total, but in my opinion, I think the over's coming in there. That game could, depending on how that game flow goes, especially with all of Sam Darnold's weapons, you could easily stack, like, let's say, a Sam Darnold with a McCaffrey and a Robbie Anderson and bring it back with like a Corey Davis, for example, who in DraftKings will get a full point per catch. So those are kind of more contrarian stacks, but you do want to focus on those higher scoring games because Vegas usually does have it figured out. So let's talk about, for example, a game I've mentioned a couple times on FFT DFS, Arizona, Tennessee. That's one of my favorite games. Tennessee's favored by 3.5. It's got a 52-point total. Something I might like there is you could play Kyler or Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill's a better, DFS value than most people think. But let's say I play Kyler Murray with DeAndre Hopkins, and let's say I throw out Rondale Moore, an inexpensive guy that will kind of help out with getting some more expensive guys in my lineup. And then on the way back on the Tennessee side, let's say I take Julio Jones over AJ Brown because I get some sort of discount there. So I've paid up a lot there. I've found some good, pricing with guys like Rondale Moore. So that's sort of my main stack. And then I go to another game I like. Let's say it's Seattle, Indianapolis. I do a secondary stack. I grab a Tyler Lockett and let's say a Jonathan Taylor. If I can't afford Taylor, then it's maybe a Michael Pittman who's a lesser value. So now I've built out most of my kind of core lineup, and I can go to a couple of other games I like. Maybe I grab a share from Kansas City, a cheap one like McCole Hardman. Maybe I grab a share from that Buffalo-Pittsburgh game, maybe a cheaper receiver like a Gabriel Davis, who's going to give me some salary cap relief. And boom, I've built a lineup. I've built a stack. So hopefully that stack and secondary stack, hopefully they're high scoring like Vegas thinks they're going to be. And hopefully the shares I've grabbed here and there are also, profitable.
And I will point out that the rookies are really cheap in week 1. So Kyle Pitts is $4,400. He's going to be very popular. That's called a chalk play in DFS, someone who we're projecting to be rostered on many teams. And but for good reason. Obviously, because the opportunity is there for Kyle Pitts. Devontae Smith is 4,500 in week 1. I like him. And then just some cheaper plays. Marquez Callaway, $3,400. He's going to be very popular as well. Seems to be the wide receiver 1 for Jameis there. Marvin Jones, assuming that he's healthy, he is under 4K, which is very cheap. 3,600. Look good with Trevor Lawrence in the preseason. And Sia, you mentioned the Cardinals and the Titans has a very high total. Chase Edmonds is 4,600. He's obviously very cheap. It's full PPR. He could catch some passes. We'll see what the breakdown is between him and James Conner, but I think he's a lower cost running back if you need one.
And Adam, I got a surprise for you. You ready?
Oh, yeah.
Are you ready for this? Because I trust you'll be playing DFS week 1. Seattle, Indianapolis, 48.5 point total. Pretty high, not the highest, but in that ballpark where it's just kind of a difference of a point or two here and there. Gerald Everett is only 3,400. I am going to be playing him week 1. I'll just tell you that right now. I actually like Gerald Everett this year. And I think in a game like that's a pretty good value because he could be sneaky and really nobody's going to be on him because nobody really trusts Gerald Everett at this point.
I am currently making my lineup for the FanDuel Millionaire Contest. And I'm just doing it based on, I've got Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, and Odell Beckham. Okay. So I started with that. I went with Najee Harris, who's only 6,500, and Chase Edmonds as my running backs.
Mm-hmm.
I went with T. Higgins as my third receiver. George Kittle is my tight end, and I have the Broncos DST. So I need a flex, and I am deciding between DJ Moore against the Jets or Chris Carson at Indianapolis. And in my mind, if I was somebody say, hey, who should I start, Carson or Moore? I would tell them to start Carson. FanDuel's half PPR too. So I feel like I should go Carson. But then again, the Jets could be horrible defensively. The Colts won't be. And what should I do? Carson or DJ Moore?
I think just in a vacuum in the half PPR, I probably would prefer Carson. But the fact that you're putting this lineup in a millionaire contest, you want to differentiate. You want to do something a little bit different. So the fact that there's 3 wide receivers on Carolina, people might be trying to figure out, well, which one should I use? You might get DJ Moore at a lower roster rate in week 1. So because of that, I would go with DJ Moore. He's probably a little bit more contrarian than someone like Chris Carson.
I was actually going to go with Robbie Anderson with the revenge game, but Higgins was a little cheaper, and I just love T. Higgins. So. And
his price is great. I'm not looking at the FanDuel one, but I assume it's equally great because on DraftKings, he's very cheap.
Yeah, it's 6,000 on FanDuel. It's cheaper than Robbie Anderson.
You might want to look into James Robinson. I think he's super cheap. They released this pricing before the injury to Travis Etienne, and he has a great matchup against the Houston Texans. So, he's going to be very popular. But
it's a good point. You're absolutely right. And, on DraftKings, it's a little harder to make a lineup. It's a little deeper, right?
Well, I think the pricing is a little bit stricter on DraftKings. Yeah. Not in week 1. It's actually, pretty soft pricing early on in the season. But what I've noticed just years of playing is that I always feel a little bit better about my FanDuel lineups because the pricing is a little bit more loose on FanDuel versus DraftKings.
Yeah, I think it's easier to put it together like a dream team. So sometimes on DraftKings, do you feel like you need a deep sleeper on DraftKings? And would Carlos Hyde potentially be a deep sleeper, or is that too low end?
It's probably too low end. I'm all for the deep sleepers, like the sort of punt plays that might win you a milli maker. If I was going to typically the punt plays that are going to win you a milli maker are probably on the receiver end because they have, while they might not share the volume a running back might have, but they do have like a greater upside, a greater ceiling. So I don't think Hyde has the ceiling you're looking for in like that type of contest.
Yeah. For example, Kendrick Bourne was a name we brought up the other day as like a super cheap punt play on DraftKings because slot receiver, Mac Jones is his first start. Maybe he leans on someone, over the middle of the field early on. And I think he's like sub 4K or something in week 1.
All right, guys. Well, thank you. For much more advice, check out the Fantasy Football DFS podcast. See ya, Frank. You guys have a great weekend.
All right, man. Thanks for having me. And you too, Adam. I have a feeling we'll be talking a lot this season.
I think so, man. Especially with that hat you've got on. We got a lot of text messages to exchange.
Let's go.
Thanks, Adam.
Everybody, enjoy your weekend. And this is your last weekend without football. So do something on Sunday because your Sundays are going to be tied up for the next 18 weeks. We'll talk to you soon on Fantasy Football Time.